then.
Okay, I'm calling the meeting to order. Julie, roll call, please.
Mr. Hawes,
Yes.
Mr. Dunn, Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Gentile,
Yes.
Ms. Goodman. Yeah.
Yep.
Mr. Suda,
Yes.
Ms. Kaminsky. Did tell me she was not gonna make it.
Yes.
Correct.
So we got
You
four.
didn't hear from Karen, but,
I
So I
did,
should-
she told me she was gonna Zoom for the meeting,
okay,
so
so I
just
should
keep
be on
watching,
the
yeah.
lookout.
Okay. So we got a quorum, we got four, so we'll move forward. Okay, any public comments? None that I see or hear,
And there is no public online.
and there's no public online, thank you. Okay. Moving on, approval of last month's meeting minutes, Monday, August 16th, 2001, or 2021.
I think you skipped the agenda.
Oh, sorry. Moving back to the agenda. Reviewing the agenda myself, there's one thing that maybe I would put as new business, as part F, where we want to do part 139, administrative and service agreement. That goes in line with D and E parts. Now, does anybody else have a chance to review the agenda and any other proposed change or recommended changes?
Did you say you wanted to call in?
I was gonna suggest part F, or item F.
Yeah.
It's part 139, administrative and service agreement. That's part of the three items that we sign each year with Barry.
Actually,
Yeah.
my recollection is that was a 2-year contract.
I believe if they're all 1 year, they were all moved into 1-year situations.
I could be wrong.
We can double check on that.
Traditionally, we try to align that with the airline's contract, because they kind of are.
Well, then
going together.
I could be wrong. I can go ahead and double check that.
But as we talked before, it's really the same discussion on all three.
Okay, because I know, okay, let's leave it like that. Do I have a motion to amend the proposed agenda as proposed?
Make a motion to approve the agenda as modified.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Those in favor, say
Aye.
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 Okay, motion passed. Okay, now moving on to approval of last month's minutes. I assume everybody has gotten a copy of it. If not, we'll make another copy and you can review it for a minute or two. If that's the case, any comments, changes, adjustments? For me, I saw nothing that needs adjustments. My comment on it is okay.
Then I move we approve.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay. Should I hear a vote of yeas for approval?
Yay.
Okay. Any negatives? Motion passed for approval of the minutes for August 16th, 2021. Okay, moving on to, August 21 accounts payable. I hope everybody has gotten a copy of it and has had a chance to review it. Any comments? I guess on my part, I just have one comment. The tractor repairs vary. We had some mention last time the insurance was covering that, or
Yes,
some of it?
yes.
Okay,
The repairs did end up being a little bit more than the quote, so it went a
Okay.
little bit above what the insurance covered, but not too significant.
Okay, good.
Online, you just have Susan on there, right?
Yes,
Okay,
yep.
just wanna make sure
What's that?
for the attendance, for my minutes, I wanna make sure I had everybody that's online.
Online?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. Okay, if there's no other comments,
Karen is now joining.
okay.
Make a motion to approve the August 2021 accounts payable report.
Okay, do I hear a second on that?
Second.
Okay, do we have a vote for approval of the August 2021 accounts payable as presented? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those not in favor say nay. Motion passed. Moving on to the August 2021, financial statements, the revenue and expense, trial basis report, and the other attachments, Orchard Beach Aviation summary for rent, and so on. Everybody has gotten a copy of it, has had a chance to review it. Any comments, adjustments?
Comment?
I don't know.
Is the tractor repairs, were they a July expense and just paid in August, or was that an August expense?
Susan, can you answer that?
Just a minute. Trying to be two people. Let's see. They were paid in August, and then I applied the check that came from the insurance in August. That's why you don't see a big difference in the rental, the repairs and maintenance. So that the repair went to that, but then the insurance check also offset that account. So I did it so it would cross-reference in the same month.
Answer my
We
question.
did,
I didn't realize-
because we did get
The
the,
insurance company was that proficient that they got the check
yeah,
done already.
yeah, we
Before-
got the check before, it was actually fixed. So I think we got that like in July, so I held the check because I didn't wanna have a huge dip there. So then I deposited that in August once we got, once we paid that, so that's how that went, so it's all good.
Thank you, Susan.
Yep.
Any other comments from the board?
Make a motion to approve the August 2021 financial statement as presented.
And I will second that. Could I hear a vote for motion to pass it? Vote of yeas?
Yay.
Yeah.
Any negatives? Motion passed as presented. Karen, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay,
Don't
hello.
we usually do a roll call for the,
Oh, yeah, we do both of those.
for both of
Financial.
those?
Yeah.
I hesitated on my yay, I was waiting for my name.
Oh, okay. Adjustment here in procedures, going back to the the accounts payable report. We need a roll call for that versus just a vote, a verbal vote. So Julie, would you do a roll call for
Sure.
motion to approve the August 2021 accounts payable?
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Suda,
Yes.
Ms. Goodman,
Yes.
Mr. Gentili,
Yes.
Mr. Hawes.
Yes. And moving forward, also we need a roll call for the approval of the financial statement for the August 2021. That includes the financial statement for revenue, expenses, and trial balance sheet. Julie, could we have a roll call, please?
Yeah, Mr. Suda,
Yes.
Mr. Hawes,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Gentile?
Yes.
Ms. Goodman?
Yes.
Before we move on to the next agenda item, a couple comments I'll make, financial related, is grant reimbursements that were, since this is the last month of the fiscal year, that are in process, which means they'll, at least, even if the state doesn't get us cash cut, checks cut, they'll show up in our year-end financial reports as a result of our audit. There's a $10,000 marketing grant that has been submitted, so that's in the process. This week we'll be submitting the reimbursement request for the phase 1 of the PFAS grant, so that's $50,000 plus. So that will still be reflected in this fiscal year. And then the state is closing out a grant from a couple of years ago, and there will be a small reimbursement under that, and that was for our wildlife hazard survey.
Oh, that was still open? That's good.
This past week was airport conference, which I'll touch on in my report a bit, and the state, who basically administers these grants, all the federal grants for pretty much all the airports in the state, with CARES 1, 2, and 3, they spent no time this past 18 months dealing with older grants and trying to close them out, just because they've been, the number of grants they've had to deal with over the last year has quadrupled from what they normally have to deal with. And I think they've got less people actually working on that. So it's not been a priority. So yes, it's a couple years old.
So then that $50,000 from the state for the FAS will be cleaning up somewhere around probably October on the sheet here.
I would expect
Revenue
it actually
expenses.
probably November.
Okay.
Just
Okay.
year end, because it's our fiscal year end, it's also the state's fiscal year end, it's federal fiscal year end. So there's so much activity that happens financially over the next 6 weeks that and dwarfs the rest of the year.
Okay. Thank you, Barry, for the input. Okay, moving on. Committees, reports, and discussion, et cetera. There was no executive committee during the last month, no budget committee, and no capital projects committee. So we'll move on to the airport director's report. Barry, it's yours.
Okay.
Can we pass out the,
Oh, yep, you can pass those out, and
I got one. Bring out one.
bring that up.
Oh, yours, Barry, go ahead.
Okay, so no accidents or incidents to report for the month. On the local revenue sharing grant, that, remind people, that is the camera system for the airport that we were awarded back in probably May or June. And that actually got installed June, July. When they installed it, one of the cameras hadn't come in, and it was on back order. 6 weeks later, it's still on back order. They've decided that they're going to actually swap in a different camera. It's actually a higher quality camera than what they had specced, but they just want to get this closed because they still haven't billed us, even though they did most of the installation a good while ago. And that last camera should be installed this week. On the hangar electrical meter project, I dropped the ball on that this past month, so I'm still need to follow up with consumers and get that going again. Hangar door auto latch release, the board approved that last month. They're actually installing it today, and will be the next, I think they're planning on being here 2 to 3 days to do that installation. No update on law enforcement coverage at the airport. State fuel farm inspection follow-up. That happened just prior to our last month's meeting, and there were a couple things that came out of that as it relates to our new fuel monitor system. One of the things that the state has asked for is they want a professional firm to come out and do a physical leak test because the tanks have gone so long during that window without monthly testing going on. And that also is scheduled for later this week. Manistee Township zoning updates. At the last township board meeting earlier this month, the township board approved the master plan. The next step is that there is then a public hearing, and then after the public hearing, it goes back to the board for final approval. So that's, whether that will be next month, October, that they'll get all of those steps done, or November, but within the next couple of months, that master plan and the airport protection incorporated in it will be finalized.
What they're finalizing meets with your approval.
Yes.
Our concerns
Yes.
got covered.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, what I will say is, the master plan is higher level things. I mean, it basically, all that it does is reference the existence of some state documents that basically provide airport protection. The master plan itself doesn't really have any enforcement. It's the zoning that is where things are enforced. So that once this master plan is updated, then I need to go back to the Manistee Township Planning Commission and then work through getting the results of what they've done in the master plan incorporated back into their zoning. And I will actually talk a little bit more on that a little bit later in my report as well.
Barry, on the
Yep.
local law enforcement, can you remind me, because it's been several months now with no update.
Right.
What's the actual issue there?
So, our current security plan says that we should have law enforcement presence here for all of our flights where practical. So it's not a requirement to every flight. They may be called out for something more priority, but And going back probably 10 or more years ago, there were grants available, and we were signed up for that TSA reimbursed local law enforcement for that service. Those grants expired, didn't get reapplied for. Law enforcement had been continuing to, come over the years. But now with Cape Air and the doubling of the number of flights, when we had 2 flights a day, they needed to be here twice a day. Now 4 times a day or 5 times a day on Sunday, the impact to them is much more, and they're currently getting no funding for that. So we started through the process working with them on resubmitting for the grants for what they would get paid for. But with the number of flights that they've got to do and the amount of money that's available, it doesn't really make sense for them even getting partially reimbursed for them to do that. Because the grants now versus 15 years ago when they were implemented are much more stringent on basically what those target goals are and commitments that you're committing to in exchange for that money. And they don't feel that it's worth them for the amount of money they would get for the commitment they would have to make. So that's where things stand. The next step is really for me to work with the sheriff on this and come up with, well, what is something that will work for you, and then to get our security plan changed where we don't say that we're going to have law enforcement here every flight. It's not a requirement for our size airport that we have law enforcement here from a regulatory standpoint, but since our security plan says we do, then it kind of is a requirement. So we're in a gray area right now where we're not meeting the terms of our current security plan, but we can change the wording of the security plan to make it less significant as it relates to that. So,
Thank you.
that makes sense? Yep. So last week was the fall airport conference, and this year was held at Crystal Mountain, which makes it very convenient for me just to hop in and hop out, as opposed to being in the UP or other places. It was actually a very interesting conference from my perspective because it was better attended than I was thinking it would be, just with COVID and just kind of everything with Delta variant going on. I was not expecting a lot of great attendance, and it was actually very well attended. There were a number of things discussed that relate back to us. I picked a few highlights here. There was a lot of discussion about PFAS, and you've heard me talk about that a lot. We've got something on the agenda later as it relates to that. But there's a session that's called the Air Carrier Roundtable, where basically all the airports in the state that have commercial service sit around and basically talk about their issues. And we spent probably close to 2 hours talking about this. We are very fortunate that we don't have significant contamination issues. Larger airports have more, and the State Department of Environment's Great Lakes Energy, Eagle, is not necessarily being consistent in how they're approaching airports across the state in their different regions, but in general, they're being problematic. And one of the stories that came out of that roundtable that I can relate to, and I find it symptomatic of the overall problem, is Helston, who has the new airport manager, was in a meeting with his Eagle representative, and he just asked a very simple question of, is there something that we should be doing as an airport to kind of contain this chemical within the airport, best practices? And their response was, well, we would recommend that you dig a trench around the airport 120 feet deep and fill it with concrete around your 6-mile perimeter. That was, so they view airports as having unlimited funding and able to, do whatever is necessary to meet, their guidance.
And the other thing I'd say is they don't have a reasonable answer to your question either.
Did they have any recommendations on concrete companies that were available? I can't even get curbs repaired.
Eagle human.
So, but within Eagle, there's a group that's focusing on PFAS as it relates to kind of the testing that's ongoing, et cetera. But then there are other groups within Eagle dealing with groundwater and, those types of things. And now the focus is on airports, so now the groundwater people are coming in saying, oh, we want you to update your groundwater discharge permit and do additional testing for PFAS at all of your outflows. And it's just going to be interesting. And as of now, the last 2 years, we had an additional set of grant funding from the state for the testing equipment that eliminates introducing more of the contaminant into the environment. And last year was this testing grant, but there is no money identified for cleanup, and that's where it's going to get really interesting. Again, fortunately for us, our issues are much smaller in scope than everybody else's, but that doesn't mean it might not be equally painful for us at some point in time.
Right, and again, I've got to say that, It sounds like they've got no firm plan as to how to take care of this when they detect it. Probably the most logical thing they're gonna come up with down the road is put monitoring wells down there and monitor it for the next 30 years. As the plume moves through.
I hope that's what they do, as
Probably
opposed
what-
to saying, no, you need to remove
Well,
all contamination.
the removal will probably be pump and treat and re-inject, something to that effect.
And, you know, another example of some of the frustration is this chemical has been used in many industrial processes. I mean, it's used a lot in a lot of different things. But airports are right now under the microscope because we've been testing, we've been identifying. But like at Traverse City Airport, they have parcels on their airport that used to be industrial that are their hotspots. And Eagle is saying, well, that's airport's issue. Because Eagle said, well, we asked the people that used to have factories there, and they said they didn't use any.
Well, that would be my answer too.
So, it's, we'll see where all this heads, but it's spent a lot of hours talking about it.
In fact, what I just now said, it's entirely possible they could say what you just said. I didn't know we used it because it was so, used so, what's the word, sneakily, you know, or under the radar in many, many different things. And so you really had something you were using, but you didn't know part of the compounding was a PFAS compound.
Only recently become
Right,
identified
right.
as an issue. Something related to this is 3 years ago when Congress passed the FAA Reauthorization Act. They gave the FAA a deadline of early October of 21 to identify a replacement firefighting foam to be used that was PFAS-free. The FAA, and the way that was worded was if one wasn't identified, the requirement for airports to use this product went away. The FAA has not completed that selection process and is planning on asking for an extension of a number of years in. So the issue isn't necessary, because that's what's really the hard part about this, is we're still required to maintain, have on hand, and use, if there's an emergency, this product that then once we use it becomes a contamination site. So, you know, we were hopeful that a replacement product would have been identified within that 3-year time frame, but it doesn't look like that's even around the corner right now. And part of the reason is that they're worried that the new chemicals they're using will be found to be equally bad. So they're very reluctant to say, yeah, this doesn't have it and meets the other criteria without knowing about the new classes of chemicals that they're trying to introduce. So, a lot about PFAS. Next item. So, the rounds 2 and 3 of the recovery grants have all been, from an MDOT Aeronautics and the Aeronautics Commission standpoint, all of those grants have been authorized, but the state legislature has not done the necessary appropriations for those grants, so they're still on hold. The appropriations are being held up by the state budget gridlock that's going on in Lansing right now. So I've been saying all along that we'll have these grants by the end of our fiscal year, by the end of September, because first round, the CARES grants came relatively quickly, and these have been, you know, authorized for almost a year now, some of them, and we still don't have the dollars, and we're not going to have them this fiscal year. But those dollars are still out there and should be really next year then. So that, I think, will help us financially because, you know, we haven't budgeted those dollars in. So that's kind of, when they show up, that will be nice. The state gridlock around the state budget is, you know, not even close to the federal gridlock that's slowing down passage of everything, including what I see likely now is a federal government shutdown soon. And that federal government shutdowns traditionally haven't impacted us too much. They impact certain groups that I interact with within the FAA, but TSA and other things, even though TSA people sometimes don't get paid during them, TSA is considered an essential service, and so we shouldn't see any significant impacts if there is another federal government shutdown after, you know, the end of the fiscal year now, but there may be some impacts, and so it's just out there. So last month, I mentioned in my report that we were having our inspection the day of our meeting. And this is kind of, this year our inspection, our annual inspection was broken out into two phases. Phase one, which was all the paperwork, which happened earlier in the year, and this was phase two, which was the physical airfield inspection. And as a result of that, as you saw in the agenda packet, we have a letter of correction, I think it's called, compliance letter, that identifies 3 issues, and really they're all parts of the same type of thing that came out of this inspection this year. My inspectors identified correction dates of the end of this month and the end of next month for those. Karina Newhoff has been out here a few times now, looking at their survey data, and because they've been going through this process of updating the airport layout plan, they've recently done a survey of every object in the vicinity. So they had all the data, they just hadn't analyzed it yet, so they've basically prioritized moving some of that data analysis up to focus on the area of the airfield that the inspector was looking at. So I've drawn up on the whiteboard, and I'm going to kind of move over there in a second, but before I do, I'll also just mention that it's not a compliance issue, it's in their recommendations that our airfield markings will need to be repainted next year, that they're getting weak, and that is when we're scheduled to do it, so that's not a big issue, but sometimes the state pushes back and tries to get us to push things out a year, and that's basically saying we don't have that option next year.
Barry, what did we have marked before when we had the runway resurfaced a little over a year ago? Different?
So
we had the
yes.
runway itself and was painted. This is different than...
And no, it's part of that. So in the previous inspection, or maybe 2 inspections before that, this was identified as an issue. And then we were scheduled to do the runway project in September, and then because of the labor strike with the contractor, that got pushed. But the inspector said, no, you still have to remark.
Right, and I thought we did.
We did, but that was now in the fall of
2 years ago?
2 years ago. So that remarking is,
Oh,
and we plan to do a remarking every 2 years.
okay.
The inspectors, if they had their way, would want us to do it every year. And if the state had their way, we would do it every 4 years. So it's always this balancing act. But since that pavement got then done in the spring, which is basically a year and a half ago, those markings on the new asphalt are actually in decent shape. It's the rest that were done the fall before that have gone through 2 winters now and will go through a 3rd winter.
Now, this is paint on the asphalt or on the runway? It's not on signs
No,
above?
it's all on
Oh, it's
asphalt.
paint
So
on the asphalt.
taxiways, runways,
Oh, okay.
everything that's on the ground.
Crappy paint then.
If we didn't have snow and snow equipment scraping over it,
Okay.
a lot, that tends to wear it down a lot, which is why it doesn't last that long. And there are standards around, so this isn't just paint like you would have on your highway. There are actually glass beads in this
Okay.
paint, so there's actually reflectivity at nighttime.
Oh, okay,
so-
I can see the plows pulling that off.
And
Right.
it just,
Because I know a lot of southern states use that in their markings on lines in the highways.
yeah,
And that's the
get that
reason they
reflectivity.
will get away with it, because they don't have snow plows to pull it off.
Now, I don't know if anyone's gonna be able to see this on the camera at that angle, and these. So, the issue with the inspection is basically this corner of the airport. So, this is east-west, so this corner is the west corner of the airport. Where the billboards are over there, kind of that area. So if you go off the end of the runway, we have what's known as a runway safety area, which is, ours is currently technically 400 feet wide, 200 feet off of each end, or off of the center line, and 1,000 feet off of the end of the runway. And then that extends the whole area around the runway. When this runway was constructed in '99, the standards were 750 feet. So the standards have changed over the last 22 years. And when the runway was originally created in '99, this grading basically graded an area out 250 feet, so 50 feet wider than our current 200 runway safety area, and out to 750, and then just kind of tapered off. With the current standards, that tapering off is an issue. So what the inspection noted was a couple things. The end of September date is for tree removal within the runway safety area, which is this 400 feet by 1,000 feet. And based on the survey data, we do not have any trees inside that area. Close, but not inside it. So that's basically what I'm drawing here. Our runway safety area at 400 feet is non-standard. A typical runway safety area for our class of airport would be 500 feet wide. If you go out another 50 feet, you do get into some trees. So while we don't have an issue once we've dug into the data with that particular item, if we had a standard area, we would. But in some ways that doesn't matter, because this green line that I've drawn out here that is 400 feet wide is called the Runway Object-Free Area, ROFA. And as you can tell by the name, object-free pretty much implies that there shouldn't be trees there either. And that's what the other 2 items are really getting into, is kind of this corner has trees. So Pre-Newhoff, when they were out here, has basically identified where these areas are. So what I've kind of drawn here is this red line, that's approximately the airport fence. So we actually have areas outside the airport fence that have trees as well as inside. The squiggly red line, what I'll call a airport perimeter road, it's basically a 2-track that kind of runs along here. And between this perimeter road and the fence is basically a slope of about 10, 12 feet. So this is kind of all not flat, it's just kind of sloping down between the fence. So I'm estimating that within this green area, there are probably about 100 trees that need to be cut down. Now, when I say trees, the biggest is probably about 4 inches in diameter, so they're not, you know, big trees that are gonna take a lot of time. I mean, basically, it's stuff that has grown up in the last 25 years or so, and is now causing a problem as it relates to current standards. So this is what has been identified as needing to get done. I took my staff out there last week, before I went to the conference, so last Monday, after our staff meeting, and basically showed what Premium Newhoff has marked off in the areas, and we're going to be meeting tomorrow to come up with a plan as to how we're going to handle this. I'm fairly confident that we can do this all in-house over the next 6 weeks that we've got to do it. Certainly, I don't see an issue inside the fence. The problem outside the fence is you're basically in wetlands, so there's standing water, it's getting kind of not nice out there. But technically, based on Premium Newhoff's understanding of the regs, is we only need to cut trees out here that are taller than the top of that bluff. So basically things that are taller than 12 feet tall, so that from the plane, as you go out, you don't have trees leading up into it. But I think we can probably do it all. But so if we determine we can't because of the terrain, there might be a cost for us to hire somebody to come out and do that. So that's the trees. Now, the other part of what came up in the inspection is the grading. So there are standards as to what the slope from the center line out is in the RSA, and then there are standards throughout the object-free area as well. The grading basically from here on out is not to standard. And again, it was graded out 750 feet and then just kind of pushed out from that. It's not a nice level, it kind of comes back up. That's not something we are currently intending to have done, even though the notification says, you know, you need to fix your grading. Our response is our planned response is, we've identified the areas, we are looking to incorporate that into a future federally funded project, and so that's going to be our response for that. Now, as we started digging into the requirements of this, I had mentioned that when this was graded 20 years ago, it was graded out to 250 feet. But if you ever are on the runway and you look out, especially to the south, there's a bank here that rises at a pretty steep slope. It's probably 8 feet tall. That's not allowed, actually, inside this runway, or not the runway safety area, inside the object-free area. So what we're identifying as we go through this is basically all of the grading all the way around that runway is not to current standards, and it's gonna need to get addressed. And potentially, depending on how things get interpreted, we might have to push this embankment and raise the level of this area all the way out to that corner. My reading.
A long time ago, they left that berm around the edge there to fill in that corner.
My reading of it is, you know, it's open to interpretation, you know. The standards are very strict up to the edge of the RSA, or what will probably be our future planned RSA, because again, we have a non-standard, more narrow one right now. Outside that, they're not as strict, but you can't have 8-foot banks either. So,
How did that not get brought up in the compliance letter?
it is, grading is mentioned in there.
But the 8-foot bank's not specifically mentioned?
Not specifically mentioned, because the inspectors and the FAA, really for the last 20 years, have been focused on this runway safety area. In fact, you know, when it changed from 750 to 1,000, there was most of the objects that were basically violating that were FAA owned. So that became a series of projects for the FAA throughout the country and all airports, dealing with their own things that were brought to standard. Now they're kind of dealing with, you know, I don't want to say this isn't important, but we're at the very corner. I mean, you can obviously think about this from a safety perspective, is the farther away you are from the runway, the less likely there is going to be something in that area, and therefore its priority goes down, but it certainly does not meet standards currently. Now, it has been like this for 22 years. Standards probably changed about 15 years ago. This is the first time it's been identified that there are issues. It's partly a byproduct of how our inspection was done this year, because having the inspection broken into two, the inspector was here to do the airfield inspection. He had an entire day to look at airfield things, whereas normally in a 2-day inspection, the paperwork takes, you know, 80% or 90% of that. They've only got an hour to do things. So this was like, I think, the first time we've actually, my inspector wanted to drive the entire airport perimeter. So he was seeing things that no other inspectors ever looked at before.
How does Midway comply with this?
There's an alternative, and I forget what the term is, but basically you can have something that's basically like a crumple zone at the end, and that's what Midway has.
It just seems like
Yep.
you land and you stop right before that concrete wall, and then there's homes right there in a
Yeah,
road.
and it's not a concrete wall, it's an engineered design thing that is designed to basically crumple, kind of like, you know, how a car is designed now, where it's supposed to absorb the impact. That's what, you know, certain airports have as alternatives to having.
There's no way they have 1,000 feet.
No, they don't. Yep.
This is Midway in Chicago, you were referring to?
Yep.
So, but if you clear the trees, and you have to grade all the way out into the wetlands, is that airport property, and is there going to be environmental issues by filling in a wetlands area?
It is airport property, but yes, those are things that.
Because normally they won't let you fill in wetlands.
Correct.
So that would be a good deal where the guy said, you can't fill my wetlands, the other guy said, you have to.
Right.
So the two of them can fight for 10 years.
Well, except one is federal and the other is state, so they don't necessarily talk to each other, so.
Oh, okay.
But as it relates to wetlands, there are things you can do to offset wetland issues, so you know. And we do have a lot of wetlands down here that are airport property. And there are credits you can get by designating wetlands as permanently wetland that could offset anything we would do
Right,
there.
you can reshift them a little bit.
So, we have had some of those conversations, but it's a ways down the road yet.
Now, Barry, just to, I think the other day I asked you the question on the trees, and you said that the trees, all they need to be is cut down, they don't have to be removed, no? That's still.
Our understanding is,
the understanding, right?
especially because it's on a slope here,
Like,
as long as they're not protruding above that level of the top of the hill.
So I just wanted to point
roll
that
them
out,
down.
it's gonna save a little labor and
Yeah.
time and everything else.
So, now, actually, I'm gonna go run onto my desk and grab something, because this process is uncovering other issues.
Great. Now, what's the big sin there, that they impede vision?
Yeah, I would guess. Well,
So
and,
as I mentioned, the airport layout plan, which Priya Newhoff has been working on, they had all of the survey data, but hadn't really input it into, documents yet. So this is kind of a picture of the airport, and sorry for those online, you're not gonna be able to see this, because I didn't have a soft copy. But the area we're talking about is right in here. Now, if you notice, there's a whole lot of red further out. And as you can guess, red is not good. And this is a profile. So there are 3 parcels down the road that have a whole lot of trees that at some point are going to need to be taken care of.
Who owns that?
There's actually 2 different property owners.
It's not us, though.
It's not us, no. This is well beyond, airports, probably about here.
Okay.
So, again, as Pre-Newhoff was pulling together for this, they said, well, we got the data, so they're kind of showing everything they have off the end, and this is going to be, a future issue.
But it's their issue, not ours, right? I mean,
No, because the township has no zoning that protects the airport right now. It's our issue. B, we're going to either have to buy those parcels, buy an easement. And if I were to pull up Google Earth, there are like 2 homes in here, and these are basically the trees that just kind of surround these homes. So the likelihood of homeowners willingly saying, yeah, cut down every tree that's right around my house is highly unlikely. So this is going to be what it is, which is why we need the township to have their zoning, because if the zoning had been in place correctly, it would have been the homeowner's responsibility, because they allowed these trees to penetrate the airspace.
If they change the zoning now, they're not gonna be grandfathered in?
They would be grandfathered in, yes.
So it's still the airport's
It's
responsibility?
still, yes, this will, yeah.
Do you have any good news this month?
Can't say I've got a lot. That's kind of a first look. The other end of the runway where we just acquired the Domchek property a couple years ago, we're expecting trees there because that was one of the reasons
Right.
we accomplished that. Will there be issues outside of what we acquired? We don't know. That will, as they finish up this ALP update, this is the type of information we're gonna get. And it then, basically becomes, an ALP is something that's supposed to be a 20-year document. So it really gives us a roadmap of things we need to be working towards with our federal funding. So, giving you a heads up on things that we're finding. Any questions on all of this? And again, as it relates to the short term, we think with airport staff, we can get all or most of these trees addressed in the time frame. Our response will be to, that we are doing the grading as part of a future project. Most likely, the project that is currently planned to resurface the taxiway, reconstruct technically the taxiway and related things. It's a big, planned to be $7 million project. It would make sense to be doing this, since we'll have contractors with equipment on the airport already at that time. Which takes me into my last item on this slide, is our annual MAP meeting, and I don't even know what the acronym MAP stands for, but it's the annual meeting I have with the state that talks about our capital plan and the federal funding associated with that. That is occurring soon, sometime in early October. I didn't have the date in front of me when I put this together. And we'll be basically taking all of this information and incorporating it in, and hopefully it will all get funded in a time frame that makes sense. We're not, as of this meeting next month, going to be talking about those future trees that are going to need to be addressed, just because we don't have a complete answer as it relates to all of the way around the airport on that. But we'll be looking at the grading issues in that meeting. Last month, there was a question around the parking plan that the board had approved earlier in the year. And since that meeting, I have rolled that out to airport tenants. So TSA and airline staff are now no longer parking in areas that they're not supposed to. I do have a customer of the airport who's flown in here a couple times that has a big white truck parked right in front of the building, and has been there for a number of weeks. He came in, he flew in a week or so ago, was here for about 2 hours, and I didn't get a chance to tell him not to park there. Technically, he's not an employee, so he can, but that's not really intended to be long-term parking for multiple weeks, so I need to get to him the next time he's in here and say, you know, please be nice and appreciative of others and park elsewhere.
Out there would be the appropriate place for him to park?
Or farther down here.
Oh, okay. So not a big change for him?
No.
Okay.
Moving on then, so the airline, so passenger numbers for last month, and then airline performance. So last month, we ended up with a total of 1,338 passengers, which is lighter than I was anticipating. I was expecting that we would be down from July. August often is slightly behind July, but I wasn't expecting that much down. And really the reason gets into, if you look on the performance side, 11% of the flights were canceled in August, which is not a good number at all. Cape Air had a number of those were weather related. Chicago had a lot of afternoon thunderstorm fronts going through, and that triggers cancellations for us. When air traffic in Chicago gets delayed by more than a couple hours in the evening, that pushes pilots outside their duty day, and therefore they can't operate that flight when those fronts finally clear the area in Chicago.
In fact, it almost looks like maybe today or tomorrow you may have a few more with
Yeah.
weather coming in Chicago,
Yep.
which,
But there was also a number of cancellations that were mechanical related and, you know, continued issues with the Tecna. So Cape Air has been having issues. I've mentioned this at previous meetings. When I was out there in early August, they told me that they were planning on pushing out a software update to the Technims. Basically, the software is basically the software that controls the engine. And they've been working on the software update since February, and they were hoping it would solve most of the issues that they were seeing. Well, the software update went poorly, and actually at one point, I think every single Technim, so I think it was like 13 in the Midwest, was down. So they ended up reverting that software update, rolling back to the previous version. So we, for a number of weeks, had no Technims flying at all, and now we're kind of back to having Technims flying. But in that transition, when basically all of the Technims were down, we didn't have the spare backup, the spare aircraft to back things up that we would normally expect. So that impacted us significantly in August. My next scheduled meeting with Cape Air is next Monday, and I know we will be talking in detail about this. There's not a lot we can do. It's not specific to our airport. It's not specific to, operational things that we have control over, but it has impacted us.
Gary, just a question here. Out of all of Cape Air's aircraft, how many have they replaced to the Technim now? Any idea, feel, half or more?
No, they're doing it kind of region by region.
Right.
So our region was the first, the Midwest region was first. Montana was second, and I think they basically kind of stopped halfway through in Montana as issues increased. They have some in New England, but that's not been an area that they've, really deployed them yet. So we're getting the brunt of the debugging on the new aircraft.
I think all these issues with Cape Air are going to close out eventually.
Yes, I do.
But the question is, will we still have them as a flyer?
Well, that's where I was headed.
It depends, I can't tell you a timeframe, but they can't survive as a company. They base the future of their company on this aircraft. If it doesn't work, they don't have a plan B. So, it will get addressed. I'm looking back at, look at the 737 MAX that rolled out and then was grounded for a year and a half because of issues. This is something that happens with new air types. You can't anticipate what issues you're going to find or how significant they're going to be.
But correct, sitting over here on this end, we're sitting here and going through this for 2 years. At the end of 2 years, we're all going to say, do we really want to go further with them? How much further is it going to go? Even though we kind of like them, is it time to search out somebody else until they get this straightened out to see whether they get it done or what?
You can't swap people every 2 years and confuse the public either.
I know it.
So,
Good point.
yep.
Good point. Anyway, just a thought.
Do you get any feedback, or I get the numbers are not good, but is any of it also with the recent surge? Because our numbers have dropped significantly since the middle of August, and when we surveyed our guests, a lot of them were mad because we have the mask back in place, but a lot of them also said, about 40% of the survey respondents said they're just not traveling right now because of the surge.
What I've seen is, for us, it started a little bit sooner than that. I started seeing unexpected drop-offs in bookings toward the end of July, if not middle of July. But around Labor Day, they started coming back. So I haven't done surveys, I'm just kind of looking at raw numbers. But my belief is that people were scared about Delta as it was kind of rolling out, and now people are like, well, not the end of the world, so I think people are starting to get a little more comfortable.
We saw a drop off around the first week of August. Labor Day weekend was actually decent,
Mhm.
but since Labor Day, it's been horrible.
Okay. So I will get to this in a couple slides, but, September is looking pretty good for us, unlike, August and, you know, even July.
Parking lot was great this weekend.
Yeah, yeah.
Lots of cars out.
I heard that too.
So moving on then to our capital projects update. So this airport layout plan that is still ongoing, their pre-new house plan is to have this wrapped up by the end of the calendar year. And as I've been kind of showing you things, they've got the data, it's really just pulling things together into the final product right now. PFAS testing, I think I've mentioned everything that's on here, except for the last bullet is the state is going to want this grant closed out by next April. So, which shouldn't be an issue for us because if we approve the phase 2 part today, that'll get done this fall and that will close out that grant. Cape Air service. So, kind of really talked about this, everything on that already mentioned. So September is looking better. I suspect, given where we are now, and, you know, we're more than halfway through the month of September right now, that this September will be our second best September ever. We have that summer level of capacity, so the 4 flights a day, but not the same level of demand that in July where every flight was sold out and we were limited by our capacity. We now, with that 4 flights, have more capacity than we do demand, so we're not turning people away because we're sold out, and we're really able to see the growth that having, you know, the American and United connectivity allows us with Cape Air. And since the first of this month, the Technim issues have been under control, and we've not had that same level of cancellations. When you cancel 10% of your flights, yes, some of those passengers get rebooked on other flights, but a lot of them get reaccommodated in other ways, so you lose those passengers. So that, you know, obviously has an impact on the total number of people you have in a month. And then this last bullet is kind of what I was just talking with Andrew about, around how COVID is impacting things. And since Labor Day, we've kind of seen an uptick actually in bookings as we head into the fall.
Are there any advertising opportunities around the Traverse City Airport, like smaller billboards or something? Just now that businesses are starting to travel again, last couple of weeks I've had a lot of vendors flying in, and they all complain about having to fly in up there, and they don't seem to even know that this is an option or that there were 4 flights a day right out of O'Hare.
Right. If you have ideas on how to reach them, I don't think billboards necessarily help, because billboards are more for local people or people that are driving through an area. If you're flying in there from somewhere else,
But I doubt they're gonna let us
you're not gonna,
their baggage claim.
right, yes, and they probably wouldn't let us purchase those ads. But yeah, I mean, how to target or get awareness for the business traveler who's not aware of us? We're always looking for that. And actually, that segues in my last slide. I don't have any updates right now on marketing. I've actually got our biweekly call is later today on that. But what's been impacting marketing to an extent is the Manistee Convention and Visitors Bureau director resigned, and actually pretty much all of the staff resigned. So our marketing firm, Right Side Design, is kind of filling in because there's no staff in the organization. So some things just haven't been getting attention because they're being sucked into just doing the overall marketing for the county right now, so. And also, there was a little bit of reluctance over the summer, July and August, when most of our flights were sold out. Since we got this limited budget, we weren't spending a lot then because it didn't necessarily make sense. And then as we rolled into some of the bad performance in August, hard to, talk about all these great things when you know there are issues. But now as we kind of go into the fall and the shoulder season, as I said, we've got a meeting later today on this. Any questions?
The meeting is with Right Side or
Right Side and
Cape Air? Okay. Okay.
Is there any data available that would say where most of the traffic's coming into Traverse?
Yes, that is publicly available, and I've analyzed that data before, but it's been a while. And that delay tends to be delayed 6 months to a year before it flows through to the federal government. And over the last year, obviously, it's not been necessarily good comparison numbers. I will be wanting to look at this summer's data when it becomes available, because I think that will be very informative for us. Actually, since you bring up Traverse City, as you've probably seen in, local news, they've been, hitting a home run really this summer. I mean, they're hitting all-time highs as far as passengers go. Traverse City currently has 6 gates in their terminal, 5 jet bridges and 1 is a ground boarding. They actually have plans over the next 5 years to expand from 6 to 14 gates. They, this summer, had 17 nonstop destinations. Some were only served once a week, but, 17 different. Next summer, they're looking at 20 and getting an additional air carrier in addition to the United, American, Delta, and the Allegiant that they have. They're looking at having a 5th air carrier up there. They are doing well, and it used to be the case that they had high airfares. That was our easy, flying to Manistee because it's cheaper. Well, with all of that capacity, that's not necessarily the case. So we're looking at how we address, from a marketing standpoint, the regional growth that obviously Traverse City is showing is here. How do we get some of that visibility to our airport? Don't obviously have any answers for that right now, but as they continue to grow, I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing for us. We just have to figure out how to use that to our advantage.
When you fly through here, I know you don't really get an account per se, but you capture emails.
Yep.
Is there any way for Right Side or to develop some sort of app to where when you're a passenger here, if you decide to opt in, you're opting in with the emails, trying to equate it to how casinos do it. Like in another market where I was competing against 14 other casinos in a 1 square mile, when you joined our club, we had you opt in, and if you opt into the app, we could fence our competition. So if you were one of our players and you walked into, say, Ameristar, as soon as you walked into Ameristar, you got a digital marketing ad from us reminding what offers you had at our property.
Right.
Because usually when you drove up from Denver, we weren't going to be your first choice, but hell, you're only a block away, so as soon as you hit Ameristar for their hotel,
Mhm.
we hit you with reminders of what offers. So I'm just wondering if there's something that Right Side could develop similar to that. I know we don't have a players club or anything, but
Right.
or you could opt in, and as soon as you hit the Traverse City Airport, we could hit you with a marketing piece that reminds you of how convenient it would have been if you didn't have to drive all the way up there or pay for parking.
I mean, obviously, having an app gives you a lot more control. But
Functionality,
there
yeah.
are
Other ways to do
other
it.
ways that you can accomplish similar things, and that's actually a great idea. And I'm going to make a note of that, 'cause
Mm-hmm.
That's with your truck?
Yeah, I didn't remember, hadn't shut the window on it. I don't think it's raining, though, I don't know, it was open
Yeah.
all last night at home, so. Never.
It looks okay in your car out there. I don't see
Yeah.
anything on the windshield. I think you're safe.
Clean it out a little bit anyway.
okay, that is my report.
Okay, thank you, Barry. Okay, moving on, to my knowledge, there's no old business or unfinished business that we need to follow up on right now. So we'll move on down to new business. And the first item on the new business is a memo that everybody has gotten a copy of, from April Sand. And all I want to do is have everybody be aware of this. And, I might mention, I did put a little cover letter together, and I passed it on to our attorney, George Taylor, with a copy of this letter here, and all I requested was just put it in the file in case something comes up down the road. I didn't say take any action or do anything right now, we'll just let it sit and see where it goes. And
Miss-
one other thing that.
Miss
Go ahead.
Sass, she lives where I'm at, so I know what she's talking about. There is a lot of air traffic that goes over that part of Manistee, the beach. I'm sure it's probably a very beautiful flight path, but I don't know. I personally, yeah, I can tell, I if it's you, Barry, I'm waving at you often, but I don't think it's to the extent where it's so horrible. And plus, that's, I don't know.
Karen,
It
you
was
don't
just
live
kind
on
of an
Murphy, do
interesting
you?
thing to get.
Karen, you live on 12th or Murphy?
12.
Okay, that's what I thought.
So,
Yeah.
so Karen, I'll mention this and so Orchard Beach, we are, in response to this complaint, we are adjusting our flight path. And where this individual lives, it's kind of the most remote area to actually fly over. There's not really many houses in that area, which is why it's part of the path before we turn up, the lakeshore. We are adjusting our path north, so now we're basically going to be flying over the high school fields, so closer to Karen. So we will be, approximately a half mile from this individual's for, going forward, but we will be closer now to more populated areas, so it's a trade-off, and this isn't something the airport has oversight over, because this is FAA public airspace,
Yeah.
that is being utilized. But at the same time, if we can, Orchard Beach can do something to adjust things so that we don't have someone who's vocally complaining, to, multiple people in the community, that's probably a good thing to do. So that's kind of Orchard Beach's response to that, letter.
So Barry, also I hear Cape Air. I think that's who that is. I mean, I don't know if she's got them confused. Because they come through that area. You would not, I hear the helicopters when they come into the hospital, which is quite often. We have the Coast Guard that goes up and down the coast, which, you know, you hear them miles off. And then
Correct.
Cape Air comes through that. You know, I think there's a difference. I think that the fly pattern changes with the season, or else just the trees. I can hear it a little bit better in the fall and winter. But, you know, so I don't know if she's confused that, you know, or it's Orchard Beach or if it's Cape Air, but that's very nice of you to make those accommodations though, you know, but personally, I don't find it all that, you know, terrible.
Thank you. Thank you. That was good. And Karen, what we're all saying here is what I also passed on in my note to, Mr. Saylor, saying, the airport did make a little shift, and the reason they were over in that area to the south of Murphy is because of the low-density population.
Yep.
So we'll let it set and see where it goes.
Yep.
Bill has a comment.
Go ahead, Phil.
Well, I don't know, we as a board do not have any jurisdiction over this, and I think it's nice that Barry is doing that if you know, to accommodate the general public, or that particular person. But yeah, I don't think we want to make it look like we are any way, shape, or form trying to tell him what to do. If he wants to do that, fine. If he doesn't, then, you know, then so be it. The other thing is I got an altimeter that I had taken out of my airplane a while ago and had it replaced. It works fine. It's a static air instrument, meaning that if you set it right here on the table and there wasn't pressure inside this conference room, it would read accurately. And the reason I took it out is because it was not internally lit, and I put one in there that was internally lit, or had one put in that was internally lit. So it's those things are surprisingly accurate and sensitive. And I set it for the barometric pressure and took a ride over there, right where that place is, and the airport elevation to where that's at. It's kind of hard to tell exactly where the house is because there's a barn or something there.
Right.
But it's like within 30 feet. So it's not like it's sitting on a bluff or it's down in a hole or whatever. I mean, it's within a reasonably close to the same elevation as this. So it's not where somebody could say, well, you know, it's way up in the air, whatever, and people are just buzzing over the hilltop, whatever. No, as a matter of fact, that sits somewhat in a hole there, but it's still about the same elevation what we got here, within 30 feet. Like I say, hard to tell because I was not about to take and drive off the road and go down there and say, can I put this on your kitchen table, you know?
Her house is, hard to find. You have to.
Yeah, I don't.
All you can see is the barn.
Precisely.
And her mailbox is out there on Murphy, and it just has a path coming up. There's a driveway, and the mailbox is not next to the driveway.
Yeah, I couldn't see a mailbox for it.
So the elevation at her place, by your guessing, is about the same as the airport here. Interesting.
By that instrument, yes, it's within 30 feet. Like I say, it's hard to tell exactly where the house is at. But yeah, it's like from stopping on the road and saying, okay, here's where the driveway goes, and you go a little bit further to the east, and you say, okay, that's probably about where I can see the driveway and the barn, and it's like 20, 30 feet, and that's it.
Okay. Okay, well, that's what we did, and it was just a suggestion made by Barry, which I thought, when I talked to him a while back on this, when I first got it, nice thing to do. Through the course of whatever it may be, and shift back and forth across it and so on, but we'll see where it goes. And enough said on that. Unless somebody else wants to say something more. Anyway, going on, item B on new business, FOS Phase 2 contract amendment. Everybody's gotten a copy of that, or had a chance to look at it. That should be Appendix C. And from what I've been talking with Barry on, it's just a matter of giving him permission to go ahead and do a signing off of the contract adjustment here. If you notice there, the total cost of our contract is the same. The original is the same as revised, just some adjustments of the dollars inside there. And this is what we mentioned earlier, where Barry mentioned it, we want to get it done, and hopefully it'll wrap up in a year's time. So, unless there's further discussion on it, could I have a motion to, let Barry go ahead and accept this amendment or process this amendment with Newhoff?
I'll make a motion to authorize the airport director to execute the PFAS Phase 2 contract amendment with Newhoff.
Thank you. Do I hear a second on that?
Yes.
Okay. Julie, let's have a roll call on that.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Haw,
Yes.
Mr. Gentili,
Yes.
Mr. Suda.
Yes.
Karen is no longer on.
Yes, I did see her. Yep.
Oh, she left us already? Okay, the next item on the, new business is the, 2022 airport budget. It looks very close to what we had before. Go ahead.
So question, given the next three items, whatever's gonna be discussed with the next three items, does the budget incorporate whatever those recommendations are?
Correct.
And
Those,
you're happy or the changes are sufficient with you?
yes, all three items on the next three items, which, I added the part F we had there, but they're all in the 3% that we put into the budget. And I assume, or I'm hearing, that the budget has been accepted. I don't think the county commissioners have made the final vote on it, but it's basically approved.
And
The
just 'cause-
meeting's tomorrow.
Right. Is that correct, what I'm saying here?
Yes.
Right.
But I know in the last meeting, we talked about the county could not do the salary survey, so it was kind of thrown back on the airport director, and I don't know that the salary survey got done, so,
That question was really more of a long-term question.
was the 3% sufficient?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, where I think it's gonna get interesting is next year, looking at the rate of inflation and the cost of living
5-6%.
adjustments, 6%,
Right.
which are way higher than anyone in a government position has gotten in recent memory. That's, I think, a year from now is where it'll be a little more interesting, but.
And I was up at Traverse City to get my car serviced this past week. In the signs and what they're paying,
We're right. You saw McDonald's many places,
$17.
15.
$17 an hour at McDonald's and Burger King, and another one, I can't remember who the third
That's
one
right, it was
$20 an hour.
Wow. No, you're right, I was up there with my wife to, visit a doctor a couple weeks ago, and I saw 17 at Burger King, right in Chum's Corners, as they call it, and McDonald's also. Right?
We've already raised our pay rates twice, and we still can't get out with it.
Wow. Unbelievable. Andrew, your mention of salaries and so on, in fact, that was kind of, I had a little question over here on follow-up business, and I was gonna ask Barry whether he had a chance to talk to other airport managers and pass on salaries to Miss Griffith.
No, I have not.
Okay, I didn't think so, that's why I didn't ask it. Okay. Any other questions or discussion on the budget? Everybody did pull up a copy of it and had a chance to take a look at it. It's pretty much where we had presented it before. Going on to, I'll just clump the next three items together, D, E, and F.
We need a motion to approve budget, or?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the fiscal year 2022 Airport Authority budget as presented in Appendix D.
I will second that. Do we have a vote on that?
And just, Susan were here, I know she would be saying this, is you probably should do both the general fund budget and the capital fund. Now created a separate fund. From a government accounting purposes, they're really almost two separate budgets. You should have a motion to approve each.
Okay, but the only thing is, nobody has currently looked at.
Nope, it's the third page of.
Oh, it's the third page?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't pull it all up then, okay. So, Andrew, you wanna amend your thing to include the capital?
Amend my motion to approve the fiscal year 2022 general airport authority budget, as well as the fiscal year 2022 capital airport authority budget.
And I will second that also. And
And
now,
then just one roll call for both,
Yes.
you fine, okay. Mr. Suda,
Yes.
Mr. Gentili,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Hawes.
yes. Okay. Now, as I said a minute ago, items D, E, and F, I'll just clump all those together. I just left it there to let everybody know that as soon as we clean up the paperwork on the existing contracts that Barry has, the paperwork is the date. All it is the date and the sum of money that's in the contracts. So we'll go ahead and clean that up, and probably in the next several days, I will slip out here with Barry and go ahead and have him sign off on it, and I will sign off on it.
The reason you don't have it today is George Saylor did the edits last year, and we can't find an editable soft copy anywhere. So we haven't been able to track that down yet, so.
And
I
I,
didn't want to retype the whole document.
right, I do
My
have,
Adobe will track PDF Word sometimes, I mean, if that helps.
Oh, wait,
Oh, but you think he has it?
George.
Oh, okay.
I
Right.
just talked to Jerry before the meeting, so.
I do have copies of what was from last year, and I do have everything basically is just, as I said a minute ago, the monthly sums, the agreed dates, and contract signatures. And that's what each of them requires. So that's what we'll work on in the next couple of days. So, any comments by the authority members? Above and beyond?
Is that the last item?
Yes, yes. I clumped D, E, and F all together.
Okay. For a comment, I did go to the car show in Cadillac, that they had at the airport. It's got a substantially different layout than what we have here, but I also did go to the one at the beach on the 4th of July, or on Labor Day weekend there, and it looks like that group has kind of settled their differences with the city, perhaps, or whatever, so, it doesn't appear as though they would be interested in going anywhere other than, 4th of July at the beach, so. It looks like they're not interested, and, I told them if perhaps they might be, give the airport a call,
Right,
so.
go ahead, Andrew.
Don't know if you're in the loop on this, and maybe it won't impact the airport, but that roundabout seems to be a reality.
Mm-hmm.
Don't have any firm timelines on it yet, but what I'm hearing is possibly May, if it takes them longer than they're hoping. They're saying it could be done in 6 weeks, but it could also extend all the way out to August.
Has there been any, I know of the project, but I haven't been involved with it. I mean, I'm assuming they're talking detours around.
From what I'm hearing, and I've been
And
kind of...
there's not a lot of good routes to detour,
No,
so.
I was kind of uninvited to the meetings because I was thinking it's just such a horrible idea.
I have to agree with you.
What, they're on about the horrible idea?
Yeah.
Oh, I agree with that.
They were doing one in Traverse City, on 37, and they actually made a road that went around it, as they're working on it in the middle.
That's what their
Oh,
plan is for this,
okay.
but they're basically saying it's only gonna be one direction at a certain point, so, and I'm sorry, I don't know the roads that well, but there's that road up where Douglas Winery is,
Mm-hmm.
I forget what that is.
Shadle.
Shadle.
Shadle, right.
So, if you're heading south, they're gonna try and redirect you down Shadle, down to 22, and then around Don's Road. And then what they're gonna do is they're gonna move the traffic towards the gas station
Going north.
going north, and have that be the workaround basically in one direction. I can't imagine that the hospital or anybody from emergency services is gonna be real thrilled with that plan. And the plan for the resort is they're gonna cut in an access path, they said, that I guess we're gonna have to pay for, right by our sign. And then bring all the traffic in to where the old valet lot was and have everybody enter out front there, which now we have to remove and do some stuff with irrigation systems and all sorts of fun stuff.
Sounds like it's gonna be fun.
It's gonna be absolutely miserable.
And after it's done, it's a pain in the butt.
It's gonna be nothing but traffic accidents.
They got them all over Traverse City now, and every one of them's a pain.
Oh, they are, yeah, I don't know.
I grew up in Jersey, and I was always taught, if you get rid of a circle, you get rid of it, you don't add them.
Is that right?
In driver's ed, I was actually told, circles are death traps, the only way to get through them is just accelerate and pray. That's what they taught us in driver's ed. Just don't drive, don't get defensive, just hit the gas pedal and get through it as quickly as possible.
You know, I remember the first time I ran into one of those outside of Logan Airport. And I got on that and I went around and around and around and around, and finally I just got out. And I said, wow, that's something different, I've never seen that before.
There's one in Brighton that I ran into a while ago, and we wanted to get off the expressway and eat at a restaurant we could see from the expressway. And we never did figure out how to get to it, going through this roundabout to get, we gave up, went somewhere else.
Well, we should have all be getting pretty good practice, we have on the First Street Beach.
Yeah, that's true.
So again, I don't know what impact it might have here, but I don't know whether there's a need to let guests that book here, if it does start in May,
Yeah.
to give them a reminder that it could be a detour.
Definitely will.
Are we making any motions on DE and F?
No.
They
On
open
what?
up the bridge and then they do that,
It's gonna be a.
DE and
I have one comment as well.
But there's no motion.
No motion.
Gary, I have a comment as well. I don't know quite how to word it without maybe stepping on somebody's toes, but it seems like every single meeting we have, there's some issue where our attorney is somehow involved in delaying things. There's information we don't have or an action that hasn't been taken, and it's always sailor. And I don't know, we don't seem to have any options, but I'm less than happy with hearing his name all the time invoked as a reason we haven't done something, or we're waiting for something, and that's just a comment, no. So I don't know if that goes in the record or what, but every meeting.
Thank you for the comment.
And I have no solution.
Anyone else? Meeting adjourned.